Okay, haters, it's time for another episode of I Hate Real Estate with a very special guest. But first, how are you, Kendall?
I'm good.
All right, cool. Jake, welcome to the show. And to our listeners and to our audience, please welcome Jake Arey from Eagle Bank Mortgage. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
This is the second time I've had you behind a microphone, and you are my favorite mortgage lender. So just so everybody knows that, no offense. I am so excited to have you on the show. How have you been?
We've been good. Things are a little different at home.
Yeah?
But everything's great.
I heard that you have 2 babies at home now and a beautiful wife. I don't know how you convinced her to marry you, but those beautiful girls too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Actually,
Perfect
I went.
answer.
I know. I was going to say
Yes.
I went to his wedding. It was a beautiful wedding. Your wife is beautiful, and then they have 2 babies that they brought home. So now I get to kind of tease him a little because he used to say, "Well, how are things at home with a baby?" And now I'm like, "How about with 2?"
That's right. A little different, but everything's perfect.
I'm glad.
Everything's perfect.
I'm glad. Well, Kendall and I have been hosting the show for a while, and what we like to do is kind of expose some of the things in the real estate market that consumers and agents need to be aware of before they really get into the whole thing, okay? And you're like the starting point because you're the money guy, right?
Right.
What inspired you to get into mortgage lending, first of all?
Yeah, so right out of college, started selling bonds for Bank of Oklahoma, which is an interesting business to be in. At some point, I decided I didn't want to do that, and I wanted to get into real estate. I've kind of been involved in a real estate family since I was a kid, and so mortgage lending was the best way for me to get into the finance side of real estate. It's highly correlated with the bond market. I was introduced to a great local lender that hired me, and it's taken off from there.
Yeah, it's pretty great. He's in flight with Eagle Bank. It's great.
That's right.
Yeah, and
We
so
love Eagle Bank.
We do love Eagle Bank, and shout out to all of our other lenders that work there. But here's the thing that really got me about us when we first met. I had a lot of first-time home buyers, okay? And I'm unfortunately a little too honest from the get-go. So I would be the kind of agent that would be like, don't buy this. It doesn't have enough equity, and you're going to be broke, and you're going to be house poor, and you don't want to do that. So I needed somebody that could also be like, she's not a jerk. She's just trying to tell you the truth.
She's not wrong. She's not a jerk.
She has no bedside manner. But the thing is about it is that mortgage lending is really very, very it's a very responsible career in the sense that you really don't want to oversell or undersell people on their mortgages. So talk to me a little bit about if you get a brand new home buyer in this market.
Yeah.
Kendall's like, oh gosh.
Sometimes it can be a tough situation because some buyers in this market are getting a lot of pressure from people around them and from the market in general to overpay for houses. And so, we have to kind of thread that line carefully and find a way for them to get into the house or the houses that they're wanting to get into, but structure the financing in a way such that they're not upside down or they don't have negative equity. So it's sometimes a hard needle to thread, but that's what we're there for.
Yeah.
You have that market right now where people have such a desire for whatever house that they find, especially with limited inventory, that it's kind of one of those we're going to do it no matter what mentalities is what it's turned into.
Absolutely. We have a client right now that is borrowing money from the state of Arkansas on a down payment assistance program, and the appraisal came in short and they're paying the gap. So not only are they borrowing the down payment, but they're also paying over and beyond the value of the home. So they're,
And
a little upside down in it, and it's all the advice in the world can't change their mind.
Yep.
what gets me about though is like a couple things. First of all, we'll get to your part later when they get mad and they, want to sue somebody, they'll call Kendall. But the other part about this that really bothers me is just from the appraisal standpoint, when you say the appraisal comes in short, well, the appraisal is an opinion of value based on the current market conditions, based on the intended use and user of that. And so my thought is that if a valuation professional tells you this house is not worth what you're paying and you make the decision to move forward, and in this case sounds like ill-equipped to do so and do it anyways, like that falls on you. And it's very hard to explain to a client that like, I know you love it and it's valuable to you, but when you try to resell it in 2 to 3 years and you've bought it at the top of the market and we're declining some or even saying Sable, you're not going to make your money back.
Well, we talked about it on last week's episode that when you have someone who's willing to pay and someone who's willing to accept that payment and they agree that this is what a property is worth, that's the fair market value for that property.
At the moment.
But if you then turn around and have an appraiser tell you, well, not this time, it's not, you should have second thoughts about going through with it, especially if you're in a position where you're having to borrow money
For sure. And one of the
for a
questions,
down payment.
I actually wrote this down because I was thinking from real estate, from the mortgage lender standpoint, like what does that look like when somebody brings you a contract? Because on my side and on his side, of course, he's like, who did what and when did it happen and who knew about it, right? On my side, I'm like, okay, well, is the property valuable enough? Is this a good market condition? You know what I mean? I have my own set of questions. What questions do you have for somebody coming in other than like, give me all your financial records?
Sure. So, we want to discuss with them their short-term financial goals, their long-term financial goals, and what they want to have and they need to have. And then
Those are two different things.
Can do.
Not right now.
I was gonna say right now it feels like wants and needs are on the same page, but
Right. So, we try to find out what their ability looks like, and then hopefully we can match their ability with their desire and find a program that fits that. And ideally, we find a way that's responsible for the borrowers to be able to do that. In the market that we're in now, often we find people that kind of extend themselves a little bit more than they want to. And, my job is to tell them what they can do and what I think they should do, but I can't make them do anything. And so ultimately, if they can qualify for this particular loan that they're applying for, I literally legally cannot
deny it.
Yeah, if they get approved, you can tell them it's a bad idea all you want.
That's right.
Well, and that goes back to, for me, though, like responsible lending and irresponsible lending have created some serious issues in this country. And if you look back to the predatory lending situation, you had a lot of mortgage lenders issuing out money to not credit-worthy, is that how I say it?
That's
Not
right.
credit-worthy borrowers. And I guess people are probably in fear that that can happen again. But isn't there so many things in place now between the recession and today with mortgage lending that keeps that from happening?
Well, yes and no. We're definitely in a different market now than they were in 07, 08, 09.
We don't talk about the actual years, Jake. I'm just kidding. Those years were bad.
Well, during the Great Recession, everybody knows what happened. People were doing predatory lending, and people kind of got a little big for their britches. The market, in my opinion, the marketplace overcorrected a little bit, and the rules and regulations got extremely tight. And then as the market heats up, the appetite for that loan demand grows and grows today, just like it did previously. So if you don't know already, 40-year loans are back. They're not in Arkansas, but there are 40-year loans that are back. Also, I've been
I didn't
told
know one existed.
I did not know that either. I'm like writing this down. I'm like, well, that's not good.
There are non-QM loans, meaning non-government regulated loans that are out there for no income, no asset borrowers. And so here we are in 2022, and there are loans that are available to clients, not from Eagle Bank, that allow somebody to buy a house without income or without assets.
They just have to be sure that they're over collateralized in the property.
I don't know a lot of the details about it because it's not something we offer.
They're like, we're too smart for that, so we're not going to do it.
They're out there. There are,
it's basically bank gambling.
It is.
I mean, if you pick a good jockey, that works out well.
Which
you know
is
what I mean?
we saw previously, right? And so these things are trends that tend to go on 10-year cycles, and here we are.
Almost 12 years, yeah.
Even if they exist, hopefully it's not as widespread, because that was the big problem then, is how
it won't be as
exposed so
systemic.
many people were.
Right.
Well, and I think it's important too to, like, especially in our market, to kind of reiterate the way that happened in Arkansas, because I was on the other side of the country when the decline started to happen. So I was watching a lot of severity in that situation. People in Las Vegas had lost everything. And I was right there in the center being trained how to do real estate appraisal as this was happening. So when I got to this part of the country, you guys had like a maximum loss in some areas of like 9 and 10%. And I was like, what are they crying about? These people lost 100%. So it's really, really in our favor here in Arkansas that our property values have always stayed really stable. But that's why I think a lot of people like me who have experienced the recession from an appraiser standpoint is like, be careful, because when you overinflate prices or appreciation rates happen at such a rapid rate, it's very hard to recapture that value on the other side in a couple of years when you have previously been in a very stable market.
Yeah, I was younger then and it didn't impact me as much, but I always took it that Arkansas got impacted more by the economic fallout than it did the actual value of property.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, and it's a situation where you have a lot of these communities. A lot of these communities are rural, and a lot of these families are middle class families, and they're working from paycheck to paycheck. And so, if something changes in our, I think it's like a $400 emergency that most people can't recover from. And so, when you're in a rural community or a community like Arkansas, that's going to be so much more devastating than
your
in
employer is in a sole proprietorship business who has a $500,000 house that all of a sudden the income's not the same. It just flows downstream of who all gets impacted. And I think that's more of what happened here than widespread loss of property or widespread foreclosure like you saw out west.
Yeah, out west it was wild, not to sound corny or anything.
No pun intended.
Yeah, no, actually all the puns are intended. But what's funny about it, and I had to write my questions down with you because it's really just, for me, I have days now, to be totally honest, I've recently taken this amazing full-time position with Appraisal, so I have this great job, and with iRealty Arkansas, I was able to rejoin my tribe, and I've sent all of my business that way. You don't work in real estate for 18 years and build yourself a brand and be an appraiser and a broker and then just fly off, like a bluebird would. So you bring yourself back in, and I've got this amazing opportunity to still be working with them. And in the discussions I was talking with them related to real estate, I was saying one of the biggest frustrations I have is when a new agent has to deal with a client and they don't have any knowledge related to the legality and also the finance piece of buying property. And I think when you're speaking to a new agent, you have to educate them some. And so talk to me a little bit from a mortgage lender standpoint of what it feels like to get a brand new Jamie Taylor off the street, no idea, just started in real estate, coming to you saying, I've got a first-time home buyer. I told them to get a pre-qualification letter. I don't know what the problem is. How do you coach them through the process of coaching their client?
Well, in the last few years, I would say the number of realtors has maybe doubled in Central Arkansas. There are a ton of brand new agents or newer agents, and I think that the only way for newer agents to truly learn these lessons are to fail at it, right?
You're going to have to hate real estate to play in it.
As much as I like to say that your clients need to get pre-approved before they go write offers, that can go often in one ear and out the other until they have a contract that can't get closed because that buyer didn't actually get pre-approved, or until they have a listing that goes under contract and doesn't make it to the closing table because they didn't ask for a pre-approval letter, or they accepted the wrong pre-approval letter from the wrong lender. And so I think that it's important that these realtors kind of learn that on their own, right? I can give them all of the advice in the world and tell them that on a weekly basis at these sales meetings, but until they actually run into that problem themselves, they're not truly going to learn that lesson.
Well, and that becomes problematic from the legal standpoint because we've talked about it before about earnest money and about the non-refundable deposit and how those cause more legal problems when a deal falls apart than anything else over a lot of times $500 or $1,000. And they'll end up spending more with attorneys writing letters back and forth fighting over earnest money or whether a deposit was truly non-refundable than what it's worth. And you could absolve that situation by having pre-qualification checked out.
Well, and here's another fun fact is pre-approval and pre-qualification are two different things. You want to speak to that for a second?
Sure. So the difference between pre-approval and pre-qualification is basically the documentation used to derive that decision. So a pre-qualification generally is where we start, and that is where we more or less take a client's word for what they give us.
That's basically when he writes me a letter. It's like, Jamie's got it.
She's good. And then a pre-approval generally is backed up by tax returns, pay stubs, and W-2s.
Yeah. So basically, if you are a real estate agent and you're coming in this market and your client tells you that they are pre-qualified, it is better to get them pre-approved because if you include that letter with your contract, then you're kind of more legitimate, right?
Sure. Yeah.
I don't think that I've submitted any offers in the last year that didn't have a pre-approval with them and or a letter of funding because I did learn it that way, similar to my survey lesson. I had to go through that process of in the beginning, switching from appraisal to real estate. I was totally like, I trust this guy. Of course he's pre-qualified. And it took some time to learn that lesson.
Right.
So I agree, but.
Well, as a lender, no matter if we're doing a pre-qualification or a pre-approval, my main job is to eliminate risk and to eliminate variables. And so each file is a little bit different. If a person has excellent credit scores, they're, in a profession that requires them to be accurate, an attorney, a CPA, an engineer, and they ask them what their salary is, and they say it's $68,453, and I've got, $21,053 in my bank account, and they've got great credit. I, as a lender, feel a little bit more comfortable kind of taking their word for it. If I talk to somebody and ask them, what do you make? And they say, I don't know, like
a lot,
$20-something an hour, then I'm probably going to go ahead and get that pay stub.
And then you're like, how many hours a week? And they say, around 33.
Bi-weekly.
Yeah.
It's like, that's not even a number, sir.
Yeah.
So
that's a number of days.
Right. It depends on the file. But our job is to eliminate variables and to accurately be able to stand behind whatever word we give.
So do you ever run into legal trouble with clients? Like, have you ever had a client be like, I'm going to sue you, you didn't lend me the money? Or like, has there ever been, okay, tell me about that.
My attorneys advised me to not answer this question.
But he's your attorney.
No,
Kendall, can he answer it?
I have not ran into legal trouble at this time.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, I'm
well, and I
excited
don't
about
think
that.
You probably get more agents that are mad at you than you do potential applicants for loans. I don't know what
Potential
they're called
borrowers.
before. Potential borrower.
Sure. So
Than you do.
I think that we've had a lot of success in mortgage lending because we don't make agents mad, right? Because we do what we say we're going to do, and we can stand behind the things that we say.
You also move really quickly, but continue.
We do, but our word and our trust is really our main value. We have great rates and fees and great loan programs and all that stuff, but whenever I say that this client's pre-approved or this client can do this, we mean that, and our local agents know that, and I think that that's really what keeps us out of trouble, because if we have concerns about a file, we're going to voice those concerns and make sure that the client and the agent and myself as the lender is all on the same page. And so I think communication is key there, and sometimes we tend to over-communicate to keep us out of trouble and to make sure that everybody's on the same page.
That's good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and in my experience, Jake's a little bit like me in the sense that sometimes he'll say no more than yes, because he's like, I know you really want this house, but you're going to overpay and then you're going to be house poor, and nobody wants to be house poor. When you're in a situation like, for the record, see if he agrees with me on this. Here we go. For the record, I personally believe that a principal residence is not an investment. I think that purchasing a home is a liability because you're not making any money on it. And an investment, as I understand it, returns money to you. Now, people can say in the form of equity, but I'm totally responsible at this moment, not only to fulfill my loan obligations, but I also have to maintain the property and make sure it retains its value. If it burns down, if it gets, destroyed in a natural disaster, whatever happens, that is a liability. It's not an investment. Am I right?
Well, and by the time you pay interest, if you get a 30-year loan on it too, you've paid, if you buy, I don't know what the statistics are, but if you buy a $500,000 house and you finance 80% at $400,000 in financing, you're probably going to pay an additional $150,000 to $200,000 in interest over the course of a 30-year loan.
Oh, that doesn't.
I don't know if my numbers are right or not.
That doesn't interest me. Play on words. But here's the thing. There's 40-year loans now, and that's another $200,000, I'm sure, in other areas of the country. Keep them out of here.
I agree.
Yeah. So anyways, moving on. So I hate real estate really is a premise of when things go wrong. So have you had any situations in lending or deals that were just a total nightmare that you'd like to vent about? Don't worry. We keep all the names out of it unless mine's involved.
Okay, cool. We've had a few, tricky ones that have come about.
This is the nicest way I've ever heard it. We've had some tricky ones that have come about. Like,
like I mentioned earlier, the main job that we have is to try to eliminate variables. And so if we have the opportunity on the front end to get somebody pre-approved, often we can keep ourselves out of trouble. So there might be hairy situations between the realtors or the seller and the buyer, but it really doesn't involve us. But one story that I'll share that does involve us is we had a client that called. They were a previous client, and they called and they said, we want to buy a house, and we have we don't want to sell our current home. And they said, this house, they sent me the address, this house is the house we're going to buy, and we'll do whatever it takes to buy this house.
So, always a good place to start.
Yeah. So we took their application. They had several sources of income, a few of which we couldn't use due to mortgage regulations. And so I told the client that to buy this house, you're going to have to sell 2 vehicles. And so he said, are you sure? And I said, yeah, you're going to have to sell 2 vehicles. And so they went under contract on the house, and they sold these 2 vehicles, one of which was his pride and joy. And so we got through the loan process, and as we made it into underwriting, one of them took a new job. and that job came with
Dun,
a pay
dun,
raise.
dun.
And so we made it all the way through underwriting, and my underwriter called, and she said, "Why did this guy sell this car?" And I was like, "Well, based on his file, he had to." And she was like, "Well, don't tell him, but since they got the new job, actually, they could have not bought the car or not sold the car." So if you're listening to this, I'm sorry that you sold the car. But that's an example. Never.
But this is
talked
the
about it
thing.
with the client.
But this is the
But,
thing. That's
you know.
but that's it's literally the next thing I was going to talk about is like that's the big huge don't do that. And I know this as an agent because it's happened to me on a day that I hated real estate. Don't make changes to your financial house when you are under contract on a house or really any other lending situation. If you're lending, just go ahead and I can, if you need to like do this whole thing where you're like, raise the roof. I totally do not understand what people are missing about this. If you are borrowing money from somebody to purchase something, you should not change your financial wellness situation or your financial situation at any point, correct?
Correct.
Agree.
It just seems crazy. Sorry, I'm just saying, don't change your job
So,
or your
you can't
or
even,
your.
in transactions now that are regulated, and you can speak to this probably better than I can. But if you get a closing statement and somebody's not happy with whatever's on the closing statement or how some credit is given on the closing statement, somebody will say, "Well, why can't we just adjust the purchase price?" Well, the moment you adjust the purchase price on the closing statement, that person at the title company is going to look at you and go, "We got to go completely back through underwriting if you change the purchase price by $500 on $1 million transaction."
Right.
And so doing anything along making suggestions like that or making any big ticket changes, taking a new job, quitting a job,
Selling a
opening
car.
new credit card,
Getting a new car.
going
People
and
buy new
buying
cars all the time.
$10,000 worth of furniture on credit. I mean, anything like that for your new house you're fixing to buy.
I didn't even think about
Those kinds
that.
of things can impact your financing.
I bet that
certainly.
could-
And if it would have ended up in a situation where they would have declined your financing because of that, and you don't tell them or disclose it, there's all kinds of criminal liability there.
Absolutely. We with the supply chain issues that we have right now, you have to, order furniture and then it comes in, 6 months later. And so we have more and more people right now that are going and buying and financing furniture in the middle of their purchase because they're in a hurry, they have to get the furniture ordered. And so specifically, we're seeing more furniture issues come up now than ever. A minute
That's
ago,
not surprising.
I'm going to need a sponsorship from Hank's Fine Furniture. If you guys need customers, it sounds like Eagle Bank has got them.
Now you have to bill them since you said that.
I'm going to bill you guys for this. But that's the thing that gets me is I wouldn't even think about that. And I'm so glad you brought it up because I'm sure nobody's talking about that. I'm sure nobody's sitting around going like, don't finance your furniture when you buy, you know what I mean? Unless
Sure.
they're at a sales meeting with you.
Sure.
Some Chick-fil-A, by the way. I noticed you didn't bring us any.
This is from breakfast.
I know,
I
gross,
mean,
but
really,
still.
probably
Be good
all
by
day.
now.
Well, they put enough in that cup to last all day. But my point is like next time,
I'll
Bring some
the heat.
chicken.
I'll bring the heat. So we had talked earlier about people overpaying for property. I had a situation at the end of last year that was kind of a David versus Goliath scenario. So I had a buyer whose agent was brand new, like 30 days in.
like license is fresh, ink
Right.
is fresh.
The listing agent was one of the most seasoned agents in the area. Really, really good at what she does, and she works. Both of them work very hard for their clients. But we had a new agent versus a very experienced agent, and so the new agent came in.
Just for the record, I hate real estate. He just used the word versus because that's how it feels. Continue.
In this case, it kind of was.
In
Yeah,
this market
it almost
especially.
always is. But
Right.
go ahead.
So we had a client. There was a house listed for $185,000. The realtor working for the buyer suggested that the buyer write an offer of $195,000, so 10 over, with a clause that says the buyer will pay $10,000 over the appraised value. Period. End of sentence. So it goes under contract, and it appraises at $205,000, which means that now they have to pay $215,000. So it's listed at $185,000.
I'm sorry, I'm
And they're paying $215,000 for the property. I later found out that the second place offer was $190,000. Period. No appraisal gap, no appraisal clause, just straight up $190,000. So, something like that would have won the house. And so about 3 times during the transaction, as I was working with the buyer, they would ask, is this a good idea? Am I overpaying for the house? And I would explain, yes, I mean, you are overpaying for the house. Is it a good idea? I can't really judge that. That depends on your situation, you know? And so they went ahead and closed, and the buyer was really happy with the house, and they still live there, and they're super excited about it. But that's an example of somebody in the real estate industry that pushes a little bit too far and honestly doesn't really understand the contract that they're writing, because they meant to write 10 over appraisal, you know, up to a certain amount, but they didn't put that on there. And so the very seasoned listing agent, of course, agreed to that. And she did a great job for her seller.
That is called the unauthorized practice of law.
I was about to say, but to be fair, that's the unauthorized. This is one of our episodes, unauthorized practice of law. Go into it when they write something in the blank space.
It'd take you 10 minutes to call a lawyer and get some language to put in there to make sure that you're covered.
Mm-hmm. But
and if you don't fully understand what the intent of your client is, you need to ask a whole lot more questions.
Well, and go ahead and
but an agent as such with that experience may not know to ask those questions.
But the other part is go ahead and explain, though, because I don't even know if Jake and I have discussed this before.
A broker had to sign off on this offer as well.
That's true, but the broker might not have known the intention of the buyer, and this is where I get down to the market. But it's the market conditions. When you have 57 offers coming across your desk as a broker, that's one of the responsibility decisions I made as a principal broker when I closed down Bluebird.
Yeah,
I could not supervise that many agents. But this is the thing. I couldn't supervise that many agents directly and make sure that I'm looking at every contract, which told me that I had no business being in that position and needed to step it back a little bit. Because if I'm not watching every single thing and making sure I understand the context, then it's a big risk to my client. But here's the kicker. What Kendall and I discussed on the other episode is that any language that an agent puts into that special items category and or a contract is essentially the unauthorized practice of law, because they're creating additional...
essentially, it is.
It is. I just like the word essentially.
Period.
So anyways.
That's the reason the forms exist with check boxes.
Period.
Bam.
You're not allowed to do that. And so when you do that, not only are you breaking the law, putting your license at risk, putting your broker at risk, putting your brokerage at risk, but additionally, like you're talking about, what they meant to do was, if this appraises higher than what we have offered, we will make up the difference, which is very common. But that other listing agent is smart enough to say, okay, well, if you want to give them 25 over, we'll take it. And that's brilliant. I would have done the same thing, but I would have also been that new kid on the block who's like, I hate real estate today, but tomorrow you could get a big listing and you could be on the other side.
Right. Well, you asked about new agents getting training.
Yep.
Right. That agent got some training that day.
I bet.
The new agent.
Mm-hmm.
The baptism by fire.
That's right. That is a lesson that I could not teach them in a sales meeting. You have to walk through that fire.
And that's
yourself.
the unfortunate thing about why we do this show and why we call it I Hate Real Estate, is because somebody else, even though they're in love with their house, they're living there, they're happy and everything else, from a financial standpoint, they got hosed by somebody. They got hosed by somebody on something that should have been very simple.
And let's go back to appreciation rates, because when they try to sell that house, they're going to be the only one in the neighborhood who has to overcompensate for the fact that they overpaid for the house. So they're going to have to list it too high. They're going to be obligated to try to be the.
All love them.
The neighbors are probably they're not going to love them when it doesn't appraise.
And they'll list it for sub owner, and that'll be another episode for y'all.
Oh, we already have that episode, and that's just. We'll do it again and again. For sell by owner is absolutely the worst way to sell property. There you go. I said it.
Unless you're a lawyer.
Unless you're a lawyer, but you're not ever going to do that because you have me. But that's the big thing that, I will say that some of the hardest lessons I've learned in real estate have been the most valuable, but I've really been fortunate to be surrounded by really smart people. I started my career at iRealty. I'm back there now. When it comes to law, I've always been able to reach out to Kendall. You've been the mortgage lender that I've used pretty much significantly through my career. So I feel like I'm really well protected because the people around me are very well trained. But that's a good piece of advice to you new agents, is make sure you're surrounding yourself not just with seasoned agents, seasoned mortgage lenders, seasoned attorneys. I'm sorry if I make you guys feel old when I say seasoned, but you have a lot of flavor.
Distinguished. So. With some gray hair now.
Distinguished
is even. We decided as lawyers that's even worse.
Yeah, the thing is about gray hair is nobody's going to talk about that anymore on this show because it's happening to me. Mm-hmm. So. Oh boy, well you have twins. That's going to happen.
But they're only like 2 months old, so It's not much of an excuse.
Wait till they're teen years. You'll be totally gray. We'll call you Father Time.
I got my story for him if you want to talk about it.
Yeah,
now.
I do. I just want to ask one
Okay,
question,
make
though,
sure.
before, because I need to get this out there for new agents to hear and for the public to hear, because Jake made a great point about mitigating risk. And the idea of the real estate industry entirely is to promote and maintain the public's trust. That is our job. We are supposed to mitigate their risks. So give me real quickly the to-dos for a first-time buyer. If you are interested in purchasing property in this market and you want to talk to an incredible lending company, you're obviously going to go to Eagle Bank and call Jake. What things should they have ready for that first consultation appointment?
Sure. So it would be ideal to know how much you make and a rough idea of what you've got in the bank. It would be a good idea to know what your ideal monthly budget looks like. How much do you pay in rent? How much above or below that do you want to spend on a mortgage payment? Is there an example of a house that you like, that you're interested in? And then additionally, what area do you want to live in?
Because that's where all the loan programs come in.
Right. So,
Yeah. So those are all good things. And then also just know to call Eagle Bank. That's a good one. So
specifically Jake Arey.
Specifically Jake Arey.
I think
He'll
it's
bring you
just to be
Chick-fil-A unless you're
prepared
us.
in general too. I mean,
Yeah.
It's not hard. It's not difficult to pull together the financial documents that the bank needs.
It's not.
If you're trying to buy a home, you should reasonably have access or know what your finances are. I mean, you should have had these discussions and preparations. And every time I've done it, whether it's been through purchasing a home or refinancing or whatever it's been, I always get told, "Hey, you're very well prepared." And I know Jamie's going
To be fair, you're a trial attorney, but okay.
I mean, it just is not difficult to go download bank statements and have those prepared, or to make sure
Could've
that you've
fooled
got
me.
your tax returns
Well, it's certainly a good
in a
first
file
impression.
that are not password locked, where you send a password locked tax return to the bank and they can't open it.
Right.
And just things like that. It's not hard.
Well,
It's not hard.
People
for
get
most
overwhelmed when they get asked on an application for all this financial information and personal financial statements and things like that, and it's just really not that difficult.
Yeah. Well, and before we get to your story, I have one more really great PSA, and I don't know if you've heard this yet, but this is great news. So people who are renting, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have issued the official ruling that they will allow rent payments to now be included on your credit. And there's a bunch of different organizations and companies that have instantly become massive startups, clearly, that are going around and collecting that credit information and reporting it over to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and getting that opportunity. Some of these people credit has jumped 100 to 150 points, which totally changes. And you have to think about that. This is your biggest payment that you make every month. And so rent not being included has been an issue for a lot of people.
Sure.
So now that you can kind of backdate that and go
That's
in,
a good change. I didn't know that.
It's
That's
a great, I
excellent.
have the article right here to share, but I'm so excited about it. And we'll put the link in the episode.
So when I
Roman,
used
we're
to
putting
do
the
a
link
lot
in the
of-
episode.
When I used to do a lot of debtor bankruptcy work, that was a question that we always got as to, how do you recover credit score post bankruptcy? And a lot of those people don't own their homes. A lot of them were filing bankruptcy because they needed to get out of a home loan and surrender the property in exchange for a release
Or reorganize
of-
the debt.
of the mortgage of the personal mortgage against them being personally responsible. And so that's a very good.
This is going to be a
change.
game
Well, and
changer,
as a
especially
mortgage
for.
lender, we care a lot about your ability to make your housing payment. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Most times, especially if you're just moving laterally, you're not actually upgrading a house. You just want to become an owner. A lot of times, your rent payment is going to end up being more than what your mortgage payment is.
Right.
Well, and that's interesting because that's what happened. I was like, I'm going to lease a property for a little short time. And when I went in to lease it, I thought to myself, like, why doesn't this apply to my credit? Started looking at it. And it was literally 2 days after they had made this ruling. And I was like, see how the universe loves me that it literally changed the whole law about renting as soon as I started
All you
renting.
gotta
Go
do
me.
is send Fannie or Freddie an email, and they'll just get it right down here.
Apparently,
Yeah.
but that was the
Quickly.
reason I didn't
That's
reach
right.
out
No
to
red
you.
tape, nothing.
Yeah, I didn't reach out to you by a house because you know why? Because I figured out, and this is just like full disclaimer, like once I figured out that the investment is actually in the property, which we all knew that buying rental property is an investment, but like why not rent at this point for me? You know what I
Sure.
mean? Like no offense, but I'd rather buy a house for someone else to live in and collect that income than I would buy a house for me to live in that I have to maintain. I'd rather my landlord maintain it.
Well, listen, I've been doing mortgage loans since 2013, but I've only been a homeowner since 2016, which means that for a period of time I was doing home loans like a poser living in an apartment.
Yeah.
And buying a house is not for everybody. Buying a house is not for every situation. It's for specific seasons of people's lives, and there are situations in which you shouldn't own a home.
Yep.
And they vary for every individual.
Yeah.
That's part
I
of
love
what we
it.
get fed of the American dream is that you've got to own a home with
That's
a
right.
yard.
No, and honestly,
And
you don't.
That's not for everybody.
Plus, 2.5 kids is not always a good idea. He's got 2 twins and a dog, and he's trying to like figure it out. It's a great idea for you, but it's a good thing you're in the right season.
He can move to Maumelle now. I think it's a requirement to move to the city that you got to have 2 kids and a dog.
Well,
You
we've
do.
got
It's
2
it's
dogs.
it's a
there you
Maumelle.
go, 2 kids and 2 dogs.
That's actually
It's even better.
that is what's termed a millionaire. Is when you've really got all the riches of life. You move to Maumelle.
Yeah.
So. I'm sorry, Park Hill. I meant Park Hill. That's where I live. That's what we call the North Little Rock Heights, in case anyone's wondering.
Right.
But let's get
Makes
to your
sense.
story.
Sure. So I'll make it short. We may have talked about this one on the show before. I don't know if we ever have. If we have, it hasn't been as appropriate as it is right now with you here.
Perfect.
But one of the first cases I worked on, you talk about somebody being green. I was as green as it gets right out of law school, and we get a referral from a guy who was had an offer on the table from Wells Fargo Bank. He owned I think it was a $1.8 million house out Ferndale Cutoff, far west Little Rock, and got an offer where Wells Fargo was trying to get out of the jumbo loan business and said, if you will refinance this and you'll put $150,000 down as a part of the refinance, we'll match the other $150,000. We'll match it dollar for dollar. So he gets $300,000 in equity for putting down $150,000.
Wow.
So he goes to another bank, a national bank. I won't name names. Wells Fargo just getting out of the business. They didn't do anything wrong. So he goes to another bank to do the financing, and the bank's like, heck yeah. So it's a $1.2 million loan is what he ends up getting. He's building $300,000 in equity in the house for $150,000. It's a great deal for him. So he goes and closes, doesn't think anything about it. He's closed, done. I've got my 30-year fixed on this huge loan that's really difficult to get. And turns around a couple months later and gets a notice from Wells Fargo that they've never received final payoff. And he's going.
Jake's ears just went, what?
There's got to be an error. There's got to be an error in somewhere, and starts calling around. They're like, no, we never got your money. And he goes back to the person that closed about the wiring of the funds. Well, it turns out they had this mobile notary that came in, and he signed all the documents remotely from a company that was a mobile notary. The funds, according to the bank, this national bank, then got wired to one of their approved escrow agents at a company out in California. And on that very day that his money gets wired to California, the licensed escrow agent, whose license had expired, informs his employees that he's shutting down the business, and he cleans out everything that's in the escrow account and goes to Hawaii. Yeah, including this $1.2 million. Actually, it was $1.35 million, I think, that was going to pay off the Wells Fargo loan. And so we end up in litigation about all the things that went wrong. Well, we find out that the title company, who is a local title company, not the one in this building or the one that
Represents us,
that
yeah.
is an advertiser on our show, not one of those two, did not offer the $25 closing protection
That's
letter.
what I was going to ask.
And it was not offered. It's nowhere in any documentation where he was given the option to elect the $25 closing protection letter, where he was given the option to decline it one way or the other, get it, decline. And that's, for people that don't know, the closing protection letter is essentially a very cheap insurance policy against an escrow company or a title company running
Doing
off and
exactly
absconding with
that.
your funds.
Yeah.
So
$25.
he had no protection, and now all of a sudden he's gone from this great deal of, I'm getting $150,000 in extra equity towards his house, I'm getting a 30-year jumbo loan finance that I've always wanted it as a 30-year loan, to I now have closed on a loan with this national bank, and I owe them, I think it was $1.2 million. And my loan with
Original.
Wells Fargo that was like 1.35 is not satisfied. So I now have $2.5 million in loans outstanding against a property that's worth 1.5, 1.6. And ultimately, we went through a lot of litigation. It ended up in federal court. There were bankruptcies filed. There were criminal cases, criminal allegations. They finally caught the guy. Criminally, he's been ordered to pay restitution, all that stuff. But I mean,
It
Does the
blows my
client
mind
still
though,
have-
because it's the closing protection letter is like such an easy way to fix
yeah,
that.
and we have done a PSA on this show about the closing protection letter before.
But what gets me about this, and we're going to do it again, because what gets me about it is that I'll be honest, except for the two, maybe there's three. 1, 2, 3. There's 3 title companies that I've seen do it. Okay, the one in this building, the one that advertises with it, and one more that I've seen them. This is the closing protection letter. This is what it protects against. Most title companies go like this. Here's this piece of paper that says I won't take your money and run away. and they sign it. And it's like, no. We need to explain that not just me, not just the title agent, the title company is responsible for this, and they are not going to let it happen. Now, I'm sure this is one particular agent who does that, but the closing protection letter is not something that I see title agents walk through and explain what it actually means. It's just that short little, I'm not going to the Bahamas.
Because it was a refi. It was a refi, and so there was no agent.
It's even more
involved.
scary to think about it happening with a refinance.
But from our standpoint, I can envision commercial lenders, residential lenders listening to our show, just like agents or potential homeowners do. That closing protection letter is important. Even if you're closing with a friend of yours at a title company and you trust them implicitly, explicitly,
even
whatever
more
the
of a
word
reason
is,
to get it.
that's even more of a reason to get it, because you don't want to end up in a situation where something that they did causes the money to disappear.
Well,
so the bank wasn't responsible for sending the funds to a title company and like all of that.
We ultimately resolved the case after, I don't know, it was 3 or 4 years, I think. That
Surprised
it went
took
on.
that long to figure that out.
Our client, when
Probably
you
'cause he
actually
was
went
green.
through all the documentation and paperwork, once all the discovery was done, our client is the only person anywhere in the chain of transaction that did exactly what he was told to do and supposed to do.
Right.
He's the only one.
And he's the one who ended up with all the trouble.
Part of the reason why it took a while to settle it is because he said, no, I'm not settling. We say
You
all
don't
the time a
understand
true
I didn't do anything
settlement
wrong.
is nobody's happy. He said,
Right.
I'm not settling this. I'm going to get what I was entitled to. And he actually ended up with a better deal than he had on the
So
front
was there a
end.
point at which he had 2 loans and had to make payments
for a
on
long
both?
time. Yeah.
Wow.
For 3 or 4
Well,
years, sounds like.
There ended up being an abatement agreement and all kinds of stuff that happened. But yes, that was the situation that he was in, is that he ended
Wow.
up with 2 loans on that, and it harmed him financially.
Absolutely.
All I
That's
can think of
terrible.
is that I'm never going to financially recover from this.
It eventually did get resolved. He has since sold that property. But, yep.
Did Wells do the loan? They're doing jumbos now.
Yeah.
He didn't.
So
I don't know if you've ever run across anything or heard any story like that before, but it's...
I mean, they should make a
That-
movie out of that. I'd watch it.
Yeah.
That is really interesting. I've heard of one other story that's involves a title company that's the closest thing I have to that. We work with this title company a lot. They're partly owned by a regional real estate company, and basically what happened is the title company's email was hacked, and so not us, but a different lender was sending the title company the wire instructions, and the title company sent the lender, "Hey, this is our wire instructions," and then the title company's email was intercepted, I guess,
Bounced.
and they sent the lender revised wire
I've heard
instructions.
of this exact same thing. It may be the same story.
It
It may
probably
be
was.
the same situation. Has it been recently?
Probably for
Oh no,
some
I've heard
years
of it
ago.
happening.
No, this
more
just happened
recently
like
than
a year
this, 'cause
ago.
Wow.
I've had one where I got approached on it where that exact issue happened.
This was for $80,000, which could have been a lot worse, right? I mean, it could have been 1.2 like that one that you just mentioned. But if you might remember a few years ago, at least in my circle of title companies, previously everybody would kind of willy-nilly email wire instructions around, and then this created a big movement for secured email wire instructions, and that was because of this particular incident, as far as I know. And so the FBI came and took the computer and the whole thing, but the wire got sent to a bank in Alabama, and within an hour of the wire being received, the funds were pulled, the account was closed, and I don't know that they ever found him. It's the FBI. I'm sure they found him by now, but it was 80-something grand.
Yep.
And it just
That's exactly what happened. There was the way the hack worked was that there was supposedly confusion, which was all just play, confusion about the wire instructions, and then somebody confirms these are the correct wire instructions, and it's gone.
this is the crazy part about it too, is there's so much hacking and so much internet unsundry going on that it's like you don't know who's really sending you an email, and there's a lot of times someone can imitate somebody's email or do something like you're talking about, asking for revised wire instructions. And I've received wire instructions before via email, and I've forwarded them on, so I could see how that could definitely be an issue.
Well,
but
the problem with this scam, the one I remember, is that it didn't come from the agent. There ended up being direct communication between where the money was going and where and I think it may have even had to do with the person, that the individual who was closing, like the actual borrower, or it was either the buyer or the seller, one got incorrect information or got hacked from somebody, and it just bypassed the agent. It wasn't something that was confirmed by the agent with their client.
Right.
But it's still a mess when it happens.
Man, you know, what I try to do if I ever send wire instructions to a client on behalf of the title company is I always put a little blurb in there that says, be sure to give the title company a call and confirm these over the phone. And I think ultimately it's always a good idea to give somebody a call and just confirm, hey, this is your account number, this is your routing number. But in the world we live in today, it's difficult to get people to do that.
There's a lot of people I know that won't take a phone call too, so that's hard because they just want everything to be in text. And I would say all of us who were born in the mid-'80s don't appreciate that. I'd like you to answer your phone, please.
It's hard to be in this business long term if you don't answer the damn phone.
Yeah, but a lot of people think that texting is answering the phone, and there's a lot of context that get lost in text. So another PSA is answer your phone and have a conversation with the person.
Absolutely.
For sure.
100%.
You can also hear their tone, you know?
Right.
And you know whether or not it's a versus or a
There's
cooperation.
difference. Like, okay,
What's lost in
Jamie, and
translation
like,
than
okay,
anything
Jamie.
is the tone.
Yeah, the tone is totally
Absolutely.
lost. Yeah. Well,
I've had
that's
people call me before, clients, they'll say, why are you mad at me about this? And I'm like, I'm not.
actually, I overanalyze your text a lot too. I'm like, he's mad. He's like, I'm an attorney. I'm just giving you facts. Okay.
Like, why were there 7 exclamation points there then?
No, that's
I was
me.
really excited.
That's me, actually. I'm 7 exclamation points. Everyone's like, what's wrong with her?
One of my pet peeves is poor phone etiquette. What I mean by that is if you ask me a question for the first time and you put 4 question marks behind it, it's going to be a little while before I respond. Be polite. Send 1 question mark at a time, please. Especially for the first time.
I'm following up again. I mean, that's what that tends to mean.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's funny too, because like in the beginning, I could remember being so responsive, and like I am responsive now, but like I was so responsive. It didn't matter what time you were texting me. It didn't matter what was going on. What was your question? I would jump in and handle it. And it's like, it's taken me a lot of years to be like, hey, I have an ideal client. It's not you. So I'm like, I apologize. Text someone who cares. Jamie's just going to deal with clients who treat me the way that I want to be treated and vice versa, which kind of brings me to the next point, which I was going to say, every mortgage lender, every real estate agent has their ideal client. Every attorney has their ideal client. Yours, you want to have a lot of money and be right.
That would be ideal.
Yeah, they're all right, and you're having to stand up for them because somebody wronged them. It makes it a lot
Unfortunately,
easier.
The reason people hate a lot of attorneys is because an attorney's ideal client in some situations is when somebody dies in a car wreck or something, and that's horrible. But there's attorneys out there that market themselves on that exact situation.
Oh yeah, there's a whole bunch of them. Yeah,
Right,
he's
probably
like
can't say
he's like
names
holding
now.
names.
Well,
Yeah,
well, and it's not that those attorneys are not needed. It's just when you talk about an
That's
attorney's
all you
ideal
go after.
client, that's an unfortunate situation.
yeah. When their ideal client is like, oh, I like it
dead.
when a parent loses a child. Like, no, that's not a good thing to do life insurance or any of. It's hard.
It's awful. And I, just like anybody, would represent somebody in that situation, but you don't want that to
That's
happen.
not your ideal situation. But that being said, like for me, my ideal client is a very smart client who's well versed in their own financial, but also in the world's financial and economic position. Like
That
a
takes
client.
advice.
Yes. Well, I mean, I don't really even care if they take advice as long as they listen to the truth. Like
There you go.
if somebody, so this is my thing right now where I'm at with mortgage lending and everything. I have clients that will come to me and they want to overpay. Like one in particular right now, there's some cash involved and he's got a couple $100,000 in cash, but then he's also like, it's not enough to buy the house that he wants. So it's like, he's like, well, can I just tell him it's cash and then we'll switch it to lending? And I'm like, I mean, you could, but also that's not, we shouldn't do that. I have to call the other agent and say, yes, we can go cash because we could,
Right.
But getting a proof of
That's
funds
like
from
kind
3
of
different banks.
contingent.
Exactly. And getting a proof of funds from 3 different banks and like trying to compile a bunch of money into one account, like that's a lot. So what I just told him is no. You need to be a finance offer and you need to get a pre-approval and pre-qualification and then we'll go from there. But this being said, you're talking about somebody who, if he wasn't honest with me and he just called me and said, make it cash, first of all, I would have done it and then looked
Right.
like, I was
Right.
incorrect. But secondly, when I told him, this is the risk involved. If you go cash, and you can't perform on that contract, it's specific performance violation on you. You have entered into a contract that you can't execute, and that's a problem.
If you have a mortgage loan on there, then you've got it kind of a way out then, right?
Yep. But that's the thing, though, is if your financing contingencies, this is beautiful about Arkansas, your finance and inspection contingencies are included
That's
automatically
an
with your
interesting
contract.
question that you brought up, and I want to ask because it's kind of funny. Have you ever had a client call you that's changed their mind about wanting to buy a property and said, I need you to disapprove my loan?
Yes.
Really? How does that happen?
Well,
I mean, you end up getting somebody that's in a fight over an inspection item or what, something that normally they would get out on it, but you can just say, I don't want to buy the house anymore, or they find another house.
Oh,
as an
and they can
example.
just say it's a financial contingency?
And they can just say, hey, it's a financial contingency. I didn't get suitable financing under the contract because my lender denied the loan.
Okay, so can you legally do that without having a reason?
Well, that's what I was going to ask him is I don't know if he wants to say
He's
if
like,
he's
I don't
done
wanna
that or
answer.
not before.
It has
but
been asked of me. I think in one of my first years in mortgage lending, not in recent years, that we helped with that. But in reality, they didn't have the financial capability to back up what they were looking to do.
Right.
And in some cases, there's problems on all kinds of mortgage loans. Some of them that we can fix and some that we can't. Some that we choose to fix and some that we don't. And so in that case, I think we chose not to solve the issue, which gave us the ability to legally deny the loan.
I just think and I guess
Well,
it comes back to selling your car.
As long as there's a justifiable reason, I don't
Right.
see a problem with it unless there's some law or regulation out there that says you can't partake in that kind of activity, period.
Right.
But if you're having to manufacture some reason,
Sure,
then
exactly.
that's problematic or
We
can
have,
be problematic. I don't want Ms. Owen
before-
calling me on tomorrow morning or
Right.
on next week and saying, hey, why did you ask him that on the show?
Exactly. Why did
But-
you ask him that question?
We have seen clients terminate contracts, and then I've had the listing agent request a letter from me stating why their financing fell through or why they terminated so that they would
Believe them.
let them out.
Yeah.
Right. And so I've actually had to explain to a listing agent / a seller of why this loan got denied. And these loans were legitimately, denied. They lost their job or they were supposed to be able to get money on this and they didn't. They don't have the down payment. This happened actually a lot during COVID where people were set to close on a home and then they lost their job and they said, hey, we need out of this contract. And the seller's like, we're not letting you out. And as the lender, we have to say, no, you don't understand. These people are not employed.
We're not giving them the money.
Their
I was
employer
gonna say,
saying they got
good luck
fired.
with that
Good
one.
luck letting that stand up in court. Kendall will tear them up.
That
Yeah.
wouldn't fly.
It's not going to fly.
It's
Not
just
like an
interesting-
eagle, anyways.
See, we actually litigated a case one time that I was, again, a very young attorney, and we lost in front of a jury because our client only asked for financing at one place. But this was a commercial deal. It was over a gas station that they were buying. There was enough earnest money that got put down that when he tried to walk away, it was worth it for the clients to hash out because there was a lot of earnest money. And we lost the earnest money battle on that. But essentially, they found that you didn't give a reasonable effort to obtain financing. You only went to one place and decided that was it. I didn't get financing, and you had an obligation to try other places.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and
I've
we.
never seen that issue come up again.
But it's funny because I just got a bunch of insight.
It's kind of the same thing because if you give a denial now, if someone loses their job, it's not going to matter. But if you give a denial on a technicality that Eagle Bank or its underwriters might put more weight into, that no offense to Eagle Bank, but a national bank that has a lot more assets, different ways that they may consider giving a loan or not, you might be able to go get it from somebody like a Bank of America or a U.S. bank.
Right.
Not a Wells anymore.
That
But
becomes the question of can you get is it possible to go get a financing?
Yeah,
on it?
and that's where I'm sure that you've not given the opinion to an agent that calls you about whether or not they could get financing somewhere else. It's just
right.
about why it was
Our answer is
declined
no.
at your location.
That's right.
Right. Well, and it's interesting because I just got a lot of insight into two things. Number one, that's where the earnest money angst comes from. I mean, it could be a contract as well, but now I remember. Now I know where your angst comes from with that. But then also, what I'd like to mention too is when you talked about one lender, that's part of the real estate agent's position as well. Is we're not supposed to say, oh, go to Jake Arey, he's the best lender. It's well, here's Jake Arey and here's this guy and here's this guy. Go talk to all of them and figure out what's in your best interest, which is when it comes down to being a good mortgage lender means exposing all of the options to your client, saying what you can and can't do based on their situation. But as a real estate agent, you have an obligation not to give only one.
But in reality, nobody, not that the agents don't, the individual doesn't.
Well, in reality, the individial usually
they're
bases
going
it.
to pick one and say,
Well,
I don't have time for that.
Right. The term is steering, right?
Yeah.
And so you can't.
can't drive them over
You
there.
can give them 3 names with preference for one, I would imagine. I'm not an attorney, but I would imagine you can say, here's 3, this guy's my favorite, but you don't have to use him. And I would imagine you're probably legally covered
Yeah,
there.
you can do this deal of like, here's 3 of them.
Or you can do this. You can be
Right.
like, here's 1, 2, and 3. This one has like really bad body odor. This guy is kind of an asshole, and then maybe try him. Like it could go
right.
that way as well. But here's the thing about it is if you really care about the client as a mortgage lender, you're going to give them all their options, and you're also going to make sure that you tell them, look, I'm not the best product for you, because it's kind of like with listing your property with me. I'm not the best option if you want to be unreasonable, because I won't sell it. Like I'll
Right.
put it on there overpriced and leave it, but I won't even try. And I'll tell my sellers, I'm not going
Right.
to try. When you want to get market reasonable, I am not a wall and that is not spaghetti. Like that's a house. This is a market. Let's be reasonable.
I referred a family friend of mine to a different bank on Saturday. He came to me for a product that we offered, but that's not our specialty. And so I referred him to a friend at a different bank. We could easily have done it. He wasn't going to shop me. We would have gotten beat had he shopped us. But it was advantageous to the client and my long-term relationship with them to refer them to somebody else. And so it's kind of our fiduciary responsibility is to send it out.
No, if everybody acted like this, we'd be birds of a feather. Get it? Yeah, I love it. And if you can fly right, that's a good thing. I'm sorry. I'm just going to pun it up today. I'm just done being appropriate.
Fun episode.
It's been a whole lot of fun.
Fun.
Sorry. Okay, my bad. Question before we get off the air here. I do want to wrap it up with, if you are a first-time home buyer or a home buyer or a seller, if you're a participant in this market and you need a mortgage loan, I guess what I want to know is like how should they measure the product that they're looking at against the house? Because I know that there's other options to collateralize your property and do a commercial loan. There's a regular principal residence loan. I mean, how do you even know where to start if you're just now entering the market for the first time and you don't understand anything about mortgage lending?
Well, in reality, if you're a first-time buyer and you are inside the normal standard deviation of assets for first-time buyers, and you have something from 0 to 5% down or 10% down, you really only have a few options, and those options are going to be the secondary market mortgage loans that are conventional, FHA, VA, rural development, the ADFA programs, or some type of in-house program from a bank. And so commercial loans, those type of loans are going to be out of the reach of most buyers in that scenario. And so I think that it's important that you work with a local lender that can show you the short-term and long-term benefits of conventional versus FHA, or of rural development versus FHA, or whatever the case is. And ultimately, if you can qualify for 3 different programs, then you should be shown options on all 3 of those programs, and where that puts you in year 1, in year 5, in year 10, in year 15, and weigh those options with your client. I think that's our fiduciary responsibility as mortgage lenders.
He has fiduciary responsibility too. So do real estate
does.
agents. You have like all the responsibility. So I don't feel bad for you. I mean, I do feel bad for you. I don't feel bad for us.
One
Chances
thing
are,
that's
though,
important that he said is I have always thought that it was important to use a local bank, not a bank branch that is local,
I was about to ask the difference between local and
but
national.
a local bank, a bank that was founded in Arkansas or is a small regional bank that does a substantial amount of business in Arkansas. I've always thought that was important.
Absolutely.
that was my
the same
question
true
is,
for
what's the
everything,
difference?
right? For real estate, for law. I mean, there are people that do mortgage loans in Arkansas that don't have a good handle on the mortgage situation here in Arkansas. There are people that sell real estate in Arkansas that don't specialize in Arkansas. The same with practicing law, I would imagine. The reality with most people that are first-time home buyers is that the choices in loan programs are not that vast. You're going to have most likely 1 or 2 things to look at, and ultimately it's going to come down to what your down payment is and what's your credit score.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of hard decisions to make on the credit score front, especially when you work with the right lender, because we're going to say you have 3 options, but in reality, option number 1 is by far your best option. And this is the route that we should go.
Right. Right. Well, I think it is important that you said local bank, and that was going to be my next question, was give you a plug there for Eagle Bank, is like when you're looking at this and you're looking at Rocket Mortgage, don't use them. If you're looking at a national mortgage, company versus a local mortgage company, what are some of the things that are beneficial to use a local bank?
It's funny that you say that name. I was talking to a client the entire way up here from Bryant to your office in your parking lot.
With traffic, that's like 40 minutes, FYI.
It was working with that particular company. I think rates and fees really are the easy part of getting a mortgage loan. Everybody's got great rates and fees. Everybody's going to be super competitive for the most part, especially with the good local banks. The number one thing I think is going to be being able to come find me and get a hold of me if you need me, right? The phone number that's on my website, that's on my card, that I give out to everybody is my personal cell phone number. That's the phone that's on my nightstand when I go to bed and when I wake up. I'm not going to dodge you. No local mortgage lender is going to be, dodgy,
in business for long if they do.
or in business for very long. And so we have all the knowledge of the local programs, the state programs, the state grants, federal grants. We've got the best pricing with insurance agents and title companies. We can tell you who to use, who not to use. You need looking to get a power of attorney, you need a good attorney. We've got that. You need to put in an LLC. We've got that. We know who to work with and who not to work with. The pricing really is the easy part. It's navigating the process properly with the right local people to make sure that everything is handled properly, on time, and above board, and to make sure that when you go to sell this property in a couple of years, that you're not going to run into issues down the road that somebody else might kick under the rug.
Yeah.
Because we're going to be here, right? We're going to be the ones that you call.
Yeah.
And so we want to make sure that we do this shit right on the front end so that nobody has issues later.
Yeah. And it's funny that you just said that too, because I was thinking about selling behind yourself. And that's one of those things, like in this market, that's been good for me, is that you tell the truth. And over time, I immediately, it was really funny. I took that full-time position at Aptogy, and like the next day it was like 47 clients out of the woodwork with like, hey, I got to sell, I got to buy. Of course you do. Of course you do.
Right.
But now that I'm back at iRealty Arkansas and there's a big, huge team, here you go. The point is, there is no better way than to guarantee you're going to have a good relationship with somebody that you're working with than to work with someone local that's in the public, that's present, and that they're going to have to answer the phone, because otherwise you're going to get blown up on Facebook.
When you worked with me buying my house back at the end of 2019, we used Eagle Bank.
Yep.
And I cannot remember who I was communicating with now. I just don't remember who it was. But I was on my way to Branson when we were buying a house because it was a big whirlwind. And we were texting back and forth at 10 o'clock at night.
That's right.
I think it was you, or it would have been one of your teammates.
It wasn't
because
Jay. It wasn't Jay.
No, okay.
No, it was Lee Welfel for a while.
Yeah.
But then it was somebody that I forgot what happened with Lee. He had something happen, and he either moved to a different department or
he got
didn't
promoted.
handle the loan or whatever it was. I'm not sure.
I don't know.
But regardless, whoever I got passed off to, I can't remember who it was, we had a great relationship during that process.
That's really good to hear.
I was going to say, I've had a great experience with Eagle Bank, and there's a lot of different people that I've enjoyed working with there, but definitely you and Robbie have been my top, as far as like getting out to the networking events as well. They're so fun to talk to. I know you're in court and doing law things, so you don't do that, but it's been really fun building relationships over the years. And I have to say, like, just with Jake, he adds a level of comfort that I can't add for my clients, because I'm just not patient when it comes to the financial piece. I'm just like, I don't know, call Jake. So that's been helpful to me. I appreciate that.
We get the I don't know, call Jake calls a lot, but that's
Jake with Eagle Bank. Where's your khakis?
Yeah.
We're going to put you in khakis and a red Eagle Bank shirt, and then we're going to make the State Farm commercial
and
again.
Then I will defend them when they get sued.
Oh, okay, there you go. Then we got somebody to cover our copyright laws as well. Okay, well, today there's a ruling on the table. There's always a ruling on the table, and I hate real estate. And for me personally, I feel like using a local lender is the rule.
Yep.
And that's kind of what I want to rule on today. You have anything to suggest to the court?
All those in favor say aye.
Yeah, get a closing protection letter.
Get a closing protection letter. And use a local bank, preferably Eagle, preferably Jake Arey.
Works for me.
All right, then. I'm pretty sure that's your job. But that's enough hating on real estate today. I'm Jamie Taylor. This is Kendall Grooms. We'll be back for another episode next week. Make sure you subscribe and follow us on Facebook and all the other social media platforms. Jake, it was great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Hopefully we'll see you again, and not in a hateful way. Real estate haters, we're out.